Welcome to another deep dive. And this one is going to take us down a path you might not expect.
Oh, this is a good one.
It is. We're going deep into cancer research.
Always a fascinating topic.
It really is, but with a twist.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the twist?
Well, we're focusing on the work of Professor Thomas Seyfried. He's been shaking things up by suggesting cancer isn't a genetic disease, but a metabolic one.
Now, that's a bold statement. I've heard a little about Seyfried's work, but I'm eager to hear more about his evidence.
Yeah, get this. One of the things that really got him thinking was looking at cancer rates in different populations. Like, why do wild wolves rarely get cancer, but domestic dogs have much higher rates?
Huh. I never thought about that. There must be some environmental factor at play.
Exactly. And it's not just wolves and dogs. He points to traditional African tribes who have super low cancer rates, and then when they adopt a more Western lifestyle, boom, the rates go up.
That does suggest a link to something beyond just genetics. It's making me think of how our modern diets and lifestyles have changed so drastically.
And that's exactly where Seyfried's theory comes in. He argues that it's this shift in our metabolism that's fueling the cancer epidemic.
Okay, so walk me through this. How does metabolism play into cancer?
So picture this. Healthy cells have this really efficient way of producing energy, right? It involves these little powerhouses in our cells called mitochondria.
Right, the mitochondria are like the energy factories of the cell.
Exactly. But cancer cells, for some reason, they ditch this efficient method. They revert back to a really primitive way of getting energy called fermentation.
Fermentation, like what yeast does to make bread rise.
Yep, that's the one. And it's a much less efficient process, creating a lot of waste products and acid. It's like they've forgotten how to use the modern energy system.
So it's like cancer cells are stuck in the Stone Age, metabolically speaking. But why would they do that?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Well,
Yeah.
Seyfried believes it all comes down to damaged mitochondria.
Damaged mitochondria. So these energy factories are malfunctioning in cancer cells.
Exactly. And he links this damage to, you guessed it, our modern lifestyle. Things like processed foods, lack of exercise, chronic stress. All of these things can wreak havoc on our mitochondria.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here. Our modern way of life is literally damaging our cells at the most basic level.
That's what Seyfried's research is pointing to. And here's where things get really interesting. Remember how we were always taught that cancer is all about those bad genes, those DNA mutations?
Right, the whole idea of cancer genes has been drilled into us for years.
Well, Seyfried argues that it's not that straightforward.
But hold on, is he saying genes don't play a role at all?
He's not saying they're irrelevant, but he thinks they've been given way too much credit. He says the real driver is the metabolic dysfunction happening within the cell.
Okay, I need some convincing here. What kind of evidence does he have to back up this claim?
He points to studies where they took the nucleus from a cancer cell, where the DNA lives, and put it into a healthy cell. And guess what? That cell didn't become cancerous.
Interesting. So the DNA itself wasn't enough to trigger the cancer.
Right. But when they took the cytoplasm from a cancer cell, the stuff surrounding the nucleus, and put that into a healthy cell, bam, bam, the cell became cancerous.
Whoa, that's pretty compelling evidence that something besides the genes is at play here.
Exactly. And that's what Seyfried is trying to unravel. He's not saying genetics are totally out of the picture, but he thinks the metabolic environment within the cell is the key.
So it's like the genes might create a predisposition, but it's the metabolic dysfunction that actually flips the switch and turns a cell cancerous.
That's a great way to put it. And that's where his approach, metabolic therapy, comes in.
Metabolic therapy, huh? Tell me more.
It's all about changing the environment inside our bodies to make it inhospitable to cancer cells.
So instead of attacking the genes, we're changing the playing field altogether.
Precisely. And Seyfried has some pretty specific ideas about how to do that.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of strategies are we talking about here?
Well, it all starts with cutting off the fuel supply to those cancer cells.
Makes sense. What are they feeding on?
Primarily glucose and glutamine.
So how do we cut off their access to those nutrients? Is it as simple as just changing our diets?
It's a bit more complex than that, but diet plays a huge role. Seyfried is a big proponent of calorie restriction and the ketogenic diet.
Keto, huh? I've heard a lot about that lately, but I'm still a little fuzzy in the details.
Basically, it's about drastically reducing your intake of carbohydrates and forcing your body to burn fat for fuel instead of glucose.
So if the cancer cells are relying on glucose for energy and we take away their primary fuel source,
They starve.
that's pretty brilliant. Starve the cancer cells and let the healthy cells thrive. But is keto really that effective?
The research is still ongoing, but there's growing evidence that it can be a powerful tool, especially when combined with other therapies.
Okay, so less sugar, more healthy fats. Got it. What else is involved in this metabolic therapy approach?
Well, Seafried also talks a lot about intermittent fasting.
Fasting. Like not eating for extended periods of time.
Exactly. And it's not just some trendy fad diet. There's actually a lot of science behind it.
I've heard a bit about the benefits of fasting, but how does it tie into cancer treatment?
Think of it like this. When you fast, you're giving your body a break from constantly processing food, which allows it to focus on repair and regeneration.
Ah, so it's like hitting the reset button on your metabolism.
Exactly. It gives your cells a chance to clean house, get rid of damaged components, and basically become more efficient.
Interesting. And Seafried believes this cellular cleanup can help create a less hospitable environment for cancer cells.
That's the idea. And there's actually some fascinating research showing that fasting can make certain cancer therapies more effective.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. So we've got calorie restriction, the ketogenic diet, and intermittent fasting. Anything else?
Well, Seafried also talks about something called hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Hyperbaric oxygen therapy. That sounds intense. What is that exactly?
It involves breathing pure oxygen in a pressurized chamber.
And how does that help fight cancer?
It can actually do a couple of things. First, it can boost the effectiveness of radiation therapy.
Really? How so?
Cancer cells tend to thrive in low oxygen environments. So by flooding the body with oxygen, you're creating an environment that's less favorable to their growth.
Fascinating. So it's like we're using oxygen as a weapon against cancer.
Exactly. And Seafried believes hyperbaric oxygen therapy can also help protect healthy cells from the damaging effects of radiation.
Okay, so it's like a double whammy. Boosting the effectiveness of the treatment while also minimizing the side effects.
Precisely.
This is all starting to sound like a completely different approach to cancer. Instead of just attacking the tumor, we're focusing on creating a healthy environment for the whole body.
That's the key takeaway here. It's a holistic approach that recognizes the interconnectedness of our bodies and our environment.
I'm really impressed with Seyfried's thinking. He's not just tweaking the system, he's proposing a whole new paradigm for understanding and treating cancer.
And that's what makes his work so exciting and so potentially groundbreaking. He's challenging us to rethink everything we thought we knew about this disease.
And most importantly, he's offering hope. Hope that we can take control of our health and create a future where cancer is no longer the terrifying threat it is today.
Absolutely. And that's a message we all need to hear. It's amazing to think we could actually starve cancer cells, but it sounds like a pretty drastic lifestyle change.
It can be, for sure. But Seafried stresses that it's not about being perfect, becoming some kind of health guru overnight. It's about progress, not perfection.
Yeah, I like that. Small steps. So where should people even start?
Well, Seafried has this tool, the glucose ketone index, GKI for short.
The GKI, right. I've heard him talk about that. It's a way to track your metabolic state, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It basically tells you what your body is using for fuel, glucose or ketones.
And you want to be burning ketones, right? Because that means your body is in fat-burning mode.
Yep. And that's what puts those cancer cells in a real bind, because they can't really use ketones for energy as efficiently.
So we're starving them out. But how do you actually measure your GKI?
It's pretty simple. You use a ketone meter, kind of like what people with diabetes use to monitor their blood sugar.
Oh, okay. So you can get real-time feedback on how your body is doing. And what's the ideal GKI?
Seafried calls it the Paleolithic zone. He wants to see that GKI below 2.0.
The Paleolithic zone. That sounds kind of primal.
Well, it is. It's the metabolic state he believes our ancestors were in back in the day, when they were hunting and gathering and cancer was super rare.
Wow. So it's like we're tapping into our evolutionary past to fight this modern-day disease. I love that.
It's really fascinating stuff. And it makes you think about all the ways our modern world has taken us away from those natural rhythms that kept our ancestors healthy.
Okay, I gotta ask. So if we're aiming for this Paleolithic zone, does that mean we all need to start eating like cavemen?
Huh? No, not exactly. Seafried's not saying we need to go out and hunt woolly mammoths or anything. It's more about the principles behind the paleo diet.
Right, like eating whole, unprocessed foods, getting plenty of movement, and minimizing stress.
Exactly. It's about simplifying our lives and getting back to basics.
And I guess that includes getting enough sleep, too, something I'm definitely guilty of not doing enough.
Sleep is huge. It's when our bodies do all their repair and rejuvenation. And Seyfried says it's crucial for maintaining a healthy metabolism.
So basically, we need to eat clean, move our bodies, manage stress, and get enough sleep. That's the recipe for a cancer-resistant lifestyle.
It's a good starting point, for sure. But Seyfried also acknowledges that sometimes, despite our best efforts, cancer can still develop.
Right, because there are so many factors involved, genetics being one of them.
Exactly. And that's where Seyfried's approach gets really interesting. He doesn't say throw out conventional treatments altogether.
So it's not an either-or situation. It's about integrating metabolic therapy with conventional approaches.
Exactly. He sees it as a complementary approach, a way to enhance the effectiveness of treatments like surgery, chemo, and radiation.
So it's like giving your body the best possible chance of fighting back. But I imagine it's not always easy to find doctors who are on board with this kind of approach.
You're right. That can definitely be a challenge. Seyfried is pretty outspoken about his frustration with the medical establishment's resistance to change.
He's not afraid to ruffle some feathers, is he?
Not at all. He's a real maverick, a true pioneer. But I think that's what makes him so effective. He's not afraid to ask the tough questions and challenge the status quo.
And his message is resonating with a lot of people. There's a growing movement of patients and practitioners who are embracing this metabolic approach to cancer.
It's really inspiring to see. And it's not just limited to cancer either. Seyfried's work has implications for a whole range of chronic diseases that are linked to metabolic dysfunction.
So this is about more than just treating a specific disease. It's about creating a lifestyle that supports optimal health and well-being.
Exactly. It's a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
A new way of thinking about health and disease.
And it's empowering because it puts the power back in our hands. We're not just victims of our genes or our circumstances. We have the ability to make choices that can profoundly impact our health.
That's what I love about Seyfried's message. He's not just offering a new treatment. He's offering a new way of being in the world.
It's about taking ownership of our health journey, becoming informed advocates for ourselves, and making choices that align with our values.
And it's about remembering that our bodies are incredibly resilient and have an innate capacity for healing if we give them the right conditions.
That's a powerful message of hope. But I know there are still a lot of people who are struggling, who are feeling lost and overwhelmed by this disease. What advice does Seyfried have for those who are facing a cancer diagnosis?
He emphasizes the importance of not giving up hope, of finding doctors who are willing to listen and explore different options.
So it's about being proactive, doing your research, and asking questions.
Exactly. And it's about building a support system of people who understand what you're going through.
That's so important, having that sense of community and connection, especially when you're facing a challenge as daunting as cancer.
Absolutely. And Seyfried reminds us that we don't have to go through this alone. There are resources available, like the Foundation for Metabolic Cancer Therapies, that can provide support and guidance.
It's amazing to see how many people are finding hope and healing through this metabolic approach. But I imagine there are also skeptics out there, people who say, well, if it were that easy, everyone would be doing it. How does Seyfried address those doubts?
He acknowledges that it's not a quick fix, it's a lifestyle change, and it requires commitment and discipline. But he also stresses that it's not about deprivation. It's about finding a way of eating and living that feels good and supports your body's natural healing abilities.
It's about making sustainable changes, finding what works for you, and not getting bogged down in perfectionism.
Right. It's about progress, not perfection. And it's about remembering that you're worth the effort. Your health is worth fighting for.
That's a powerful message. So what's the next step for someone who wants to learn more about this approach?
I'd say check out Seyfried's website. That's a great resource. And definitely explore the Foundation for Metabolic Cancer Therapies. They have tons of information and support.
And of course, there are tons of online communities and forums where people are sharing their experiences and supporting each other.
It's amazing to see this movement growing. It's really a testament to the power of people taking ownership of their health and seeking out alternatives.
It's inspiring for sure, but it also raises some big questions about the way we approach healthcare in general. If a simple shift in lifestyle can have such a profound impact on our health, why isn't this information more widely available?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Seyfried is a vocal critic of the current system, which he sees as being too focused on treating symptoms rather than addressing underlying causes.
He's not afraid to shake things up, that's for sure. But I think that's what we need. People who are willing to challenge the status quo and push for a more holistic and preventative approach to healthcare.
Absolutely. And it's up to us as patients and consumers to demand better, to educate ourselves, and to make informed choices about our health.
That's a great point. We have more power than we realize. And I think that's the ultimate message of Safe Read's work. It's about reclaiming our power to create health and well-being.
And it's about believing in our body's innate capacity to heal.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought-provoking question from Professor Seyfried himself. If you could rewind the clock to your ancestors' time, living in that Paleolithic zone, do you think you'd be as worried about cancer? It's a question that challenges us to reevaluate our priorities, to consider the trade-offs we make in the pursuit of modern comforts, and to remember that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most profound.
It's a reminder that our bodies are incredibly resilient, and they have an innate capacity for healing if we give them the right conditions. It's about trusting our intuition, listening to our body's wisdom, and making choices that honor our evolutionary heritage.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of cancer metabolism. We hope you've learned something new, been inspired to take charge of your health, and maybe even had a few aha moments along the way.
Remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. There's so much more to explore, so much more to learn. So stay curious, stay informed, and keep seeking knowledge. Your health, your life, is a journey worth taking.
Until next time, stay empowered.
Tough question for sure. I mean, it really makes you think about how much our modern world, all the convenience and abundance, might actually be working against us when it comes to health.
Right. We have access to so much, but are we really any healthier for it? I mean, just look at the rates of chronic disease.
Yeah, and cancer is just the tip of the iceberg, right? Heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, all these conditions seem to be on the rise.
It's like we've traded our health for convenience and ended up with a system that's, well, making us sick.
And it's not just about what we're eating, it's about how we're living. The chronic stress, the lack of sleep, the constant exposure to toxins and artificial light, all of these things are taking a toll on our bodies at a cellular level.
So are we just doomed to get sick? I mean, is it even possible to escape this modern-day health crisis?
Seyfried is optimistic. He believes we can turn things around, but it requires a shift in mindset. It's about moving away from this idea that we're victims of our genes or our environment and recognizing that we have more control than we've been led to believe.
I like that. It's about empowerment, taking ownership of our health.
Exactly. And it starts with understanding the basic needs of our bodies. Things like eating real, whole foods, moving our bodies regularly, getting enough sleep, managing stress, and minimizing our exposure to toxins.
It sounds so simple, yet in our modern world, it can feel like a radical act of rebellion.
It is, in a way. It's about pushing back against the status quo and choosing to prioritize our health, even when it means making unconventional choices.
But what about people who say, well, my family has a history of cancer, so I'm destined to get it no matter what I do? How does Seyfried address that whole genetic predisposition argument?
Well, he doesn't deny that genes play a role, but he believes their influence is often overstated. He uses this analogy of a loaded gun. You can have a gun that's loaded and ready to fire, but if you never pull the trigger, it won't do any damage.
Oh, I like that. So the genes might be there, but it's our lifestyle choices that ultimately determine whether or not those genes get triggered.
Precisely. And that's where this whole idea of metabolic therapy comes in. It's about creating an environment in our bodies that's less likely to pull the trigger on those potentially harmful genes.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not about living in fear of our genes. It's about understanding how to manage our environment and our lifestyle choices to minimize the risk.
Exactly. It's about taking a proactive approach to health rather than just waiting for something to go wrong.
But I know some people might still be feeling overwhelmed. Like, where do I even start? There's so much information out there. It can be hard to know what to believe or who to trust.
I hear you. It can definitely feel overwhelming. But I think the key is to start small and focus on what you can control. Make gradual changes to your diet. Start incorporating more movement into your day. Prioritize sleep and find healthy ways to manage stress.
Those are all great suggestions, and I think it's important to remember that you don't have to do this alone. There are resources available, like the Foundation for Metabolic Cancer Therapies, that can provide support and guidance.
Absolutely. And there are amazing online communities where people are sharing their experiences and supporting each other.
It's so inspiring to see how many people are finding hope and healing through this metabolic approach. It's like A whole new world of possibility is opening up.
And it's not just about cancer. This approach has implications for a whole range of chronic diseases that are linked to metabolic dysfunction.
So it's about more than just treating a disease. It's about creating a lifestyle that supports optimal health and well-being.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Seyfried's work so profound. He's not just offering a new treatment, he's offering a new way of thinking, a new way of being in the world.
He's challenging us to rethink everything we thought we knew about health and disease and to reclaim our power to create a healthier, more vibrant future for ourselves and generations to come.
That's a message worth spreading.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought-provoking question from Professor Seyfried himself. If you could rewind the clock to your ancestors' time, living in that Paleolithic zone, do you think you'd be as worried about cancer? It's a question that challenges us to reevaluate our priorities, to consider the trade-offs we make in the pursuit of modern comforts, and to remember that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most profound.
Food for thought, for sure. And a reminder that our bodies are incredibly resilient and have innate capacity for healing if we give them the right conditions.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of cancer metabolism. We hope you've learned something new, been inspired to take charge of your health, and maybe even had a few aha moments along the way.
Remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. There's so much more to explore, so much more to learn. So stay curious, stay informed, and keep seeking knowledge. Your health, your life, is a journey worth taking.
Until next time, stay empowered.